Hello, Pre-Calculus. In this video, we are going to talk about domain and range. Now, these are words you have heard in Algebra 1, probably pre-algebra. You've been hearing these words for a long time. So I'm just going to refresh your memory about what they mean and how we use them. So we're interested in the domain and range of different graphs just because we want to know how much of the x and y values are included within the graph. So if you'll notice here, I've got three parabolas drawn out. I've got their equations by them, and you can clearly see what they look like. All right, so the very first thing we're going to do is I want you to notice that on each of these parabolas, I have indicated that they go on forever. And when we say forever in math, oh, I highlighted the y-axis instead of the arrow, okay. Anyway, when we talk about forever in math, what we're actually talking about is infinity. So you probably remember hearing that over and over again. So all of these parabolas, either in their domain or range, we're going to talk about that, go off forever into infinity. So the first thing I want to do is remind you that when I'm talking about the domain, I'm talking about all of the x values that are included in a particular graph. When I talk about the range, I am talking about all of the values of y that are included in the graph. And as you can see in our parabola, we don't necessarily include all of the values. Graphs where we might have infinity for domain and range might be something like a line because it goes on forever in both directions. But when we talk about something like a parabola, we have to be a little bit more specific. So I'm going to talk about this very first parabola right up here. All right. So I'm looking at f of x equals x squared plus 1. So this is essentially just the parent graph, and it has shifted up 1. So if you'll notice, I'm going off forever in, let me switch back to my marker here. Okay, so I'm going off forever this way and this way. Well, as you get closer and closer to infinity in the positive x direction, this graph is going to continue to go up and over. I don't have room to show you what that looks like. It's going to do the same thing to the left. So eventually, all of the positive x values in this direction are going to be covered by this graph, and all of the negative values are going to be covered as it increases up and to the left in this direction. So for the domain of this graph, it includes negative infinity all the way to positive infinity. It covers basically every x value that's available to us. The range, however, does not do that because the range values for y, see, these are all of the y values right here. Well, if you'll notice, the parabola does not dip down past positive 1. We have a value of y at positive 1 here, and then it goes up forever in this direction. That means it's never going to turn around and start going in the other direction, which means all of these values right here for the y, they are not included in the range because the graph does not include those values. So what that means is that the range starts at positive 1 and includes it, and then it goes on forever in the positive direction because it goes up in the positive direction. So it's going to cover all the y values that include 1, and above that, it'll include 1.2 and 1.7 and 1.3 and 2 and 2.4. You get the idea. All right, so notice that I'm using a bracket for the 1 because it includes the value of 1. I do have an ordered pair there at 0, 1. Okay, so now let's talk about our other equations. Let's look at this second equation. Let's look at the pink one. All right, so this pink function right here shows a negative parabola. It has shifted to the left 2 and down 1, so that's why it looks that way. All right, so let's talk about the domain first. So if you'll notice, these arrows indicate it's going to go off here to the left and down forever, and it's going right and down forever. So that means that it's going to cover all of the positive x values, and it's going to eventually cover all of the negative x values. So again, the domain is negative infinity to positive infinity. So let's look at the range. The range, if you'll notice, see, it starts here and moves down, or it doesn't move, but it includes these values below -1. All right, because this right here, this ordered pair is -2, -1, so the y value is -1. We have no values for this graph above -1 for the y values. So the y values are going to be all of these below -1. Well, what's below -1? All the other negative numbers, so negative infinity. All right, so we are going to write our range then as inclusive of -1 down to negative infinity. There's our range, just like that. Okay, so let me get rid of some of this here. Now we're going to look at our green graph. If I can find my green pen. All right, so this is also a function. It is a parabola with a negative and has been moved down 3, so that's why it's reflecting. So anytime it's going off forever down here, we're going to have negative and positive infinity for our domain again. And hopefully you've gathered by now that all parabolas, whether they're positive or negative, as long as it's an f of x equals an x squared situation, we are always going to have positive and negative infinity for our domain. Range, not so much. Okay, now I want you to notice that our graph has values starting where y is at -1, 2, 3. Okay, so y is -3 right here, and then it goes on forever in the negative direction. So the range is going to be -3 to negative infinity. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.